The tension was already in the air when these cops pulled over a man they thought they could easily control. It started like any ordinary traffic stop, but what unfolded next left them completely stunned. This wasn't just about a driver showing his ID. It was about standing up for rights, questioning authority, and handling the situation with unwavering confidence. The man knew his legal boundaries inside out, and the officers quickly realized they were dealing with someone who wasn't about to be intimidated. As the exchange heated up, the line between authority and accountability blurred, leaving everyone watching unsure of how it would end. What did he say that left them speechless? How far would this standoff go? Stick around because this story takes unexpected turns you won't believe. It's a masterclass in composure, the law, and how to handle moments like these with finesse. The man, calm and collected, sat behind the wheel as the officers approached. They asked for his ID, but instead of handing it over, he politely questioned their reason for the stop. His tone was firm but respectful, making it clear he wasn't there to cause trouble, but he also wasn't about to waive his rights. The officers exchanged a quick glance, visibly caught off guard. Most people would comply without hesitation, but this man seemed to know something they didn't. As the conversation continued, the officers began to push harder, trying to assert their authority. But every time they did, the man responded with sharp, factual statements that left them struggling for a rebuttal. Behind the tension, there was an unspoken battle of wits unfolding. Who was this guy? How did he know so much about the law? The situation was getting more intense by the second, and everyone watching could feel it. The lead officer, clearly frustrated, tried a different approach. He raised his voice slightly, leaning in as if to intimidate. "Sir, if you don't hand over your ID, we'll have to take further action." But the man didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly responded, "Can you please tell me the law that requires me to provide it under these circumstances?" His voice was steady, almost disarming, and for a moment, the officer hesitated. The second officer, standing nearby, chimed in, trying to back up his partner. "Look, we're just doing our job. If you're not hiding anything, this shouldn't be a problem." But it was clear they were trying to regain control of a situation slipping through their fingers. Meanwhile, the man remained unshaken, continuing to cite laws and court cases that most people wouldn't know off the top of their heads. Was he a lawyer? An activist? The officers didn't know, but the growing crowd nearby was starting to take notice. The tension was now undeniable. The officers were visibly uneasy, their confident demeanor starting to crack as the man continued to calmly challenge their authority. The first officer stepped back as if trying to regroup, while the second seemed to be debating whether to escalate the situation. "Sir, step out of the car," the lead officer finally demanded, his voice firm but no longer as certain as before. The man leaned back slightly in his seat, maintaining his composure. "Under what legal basis?" he asked, his tone unwavering. A flicker of frustration crossed the officer's face as he struggled to give a clear answer. By now, a small group of bystanders had gathered nearby, quietly watching the standoff unfold. Their presence added another layer of pressure, and it was clear the officers were becoming more aware of the audience. With each passing second, the tension grew thicker, and everyone was waiting for the next move, wondering who would crack first. Just when it seemed like the officers might force the issue, the man did something no one expected. He calmly pulled out his phone and began recording. "For my safety and yours," he said, holding it steady. The officers froze for a moment, clearly aware that the situation had just escalated. Now, not only was there an audience on the street, but every word and action was being documented. The lead officer took a deep breath, his frustration now mixed with hesitation. The second officer stepped closer, as if to back him up, But before he could speak, the man asked a question that caught them both off guard. "Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" The officers exchanged glances, their silence speaking volumes. The crowd, now larger, murmured quietly, sensing a shift in power. The stakes were higher than ever, and it was clear that this wasn't going to end the way anyone had predicted. The lead officer finally broke the silence, his voice noticeably calmer. "You're being detained for questioning," he said, though his tone lacked the authority it had earlier. The man nodded, still recording. "Okay, then I invoke my right to remain silent and request a supervisor on the scene." That one statement seemed to shake the officers even more. They hesitated, clearly unsure of their next move, when a third patrol car pulled up, this time with a sergeant stepping out. The sergeant walked over, assessing the situation quickly. He asked the officers for a rundown, then turned to the man, who calmly repeated everything that had happened. After a long pause, the sergeant gave a curt nod and turned to his officers. "Release him. He's right." The crowd erupted in quiet cheers, but just as the man put his phone down and prepared to drive off, he turned back to the sergeant. "By the way, you might want to educate your team on the Fourth Amendment." The sergeant's expression shifted ever so slightly, but he simply nodded again. As the man drove away, it was clear that he hadn't just stood his ground. He'd made a lasting impression. As the man drove off, the crowd slowly dispersed, many of them chatting about what they had just witnessed. It wasn't every day someone stood up so confidently and won, leaving even the authorities at a loss. The officers, visibly humbled, exchanged a few quiet words with their sergeant before returning to their cars. It was clear they had learned a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. For the man, it wasn't about showing off or creating a scene. It was about knowing his rights and holding his ground respectfully. Moments like these serve as a reminder of the importance of understanding the law and staying calm under pressure. The video of the encounter quickly gained attention online, sparking conversations about accountability, personal rights, and the balance of power. In the end, it wasn't just a victory for one man. It was a moment that encouraged others to educate themselves and stand firm when it matters most.